You're listening to episode 244 of Mitolife Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn. Today I'm speaking with Siim Land, a author, public speaker, and consultant from Estonia. He's authored many books, including Metabolic Autophagy, Stronger by Stress, and he's co-authored books with Dr. James Dinico Lantonio, including The Immunity Fix and The Mineral Fix. In this interview, we speak about his thoughts on longevity and extending lifespan, as well as quality of life. I ask him his thoughts on genetics, and he talks about his genetic predispositions and what he's doing to mitigate the risks of developing chronic conditions. I ask him about heart disease and his thoughts on how to mitigate that. We talk about using the sauna, drinking coffee, smoking, his favorite supplements, his thoughts on the carnivore diet, exercise, resistance bands, sleep, intermittent fasting, eating seasonally, his thoughts on blue zones. And then I ask him listener questions, including fiber consumption, supporting longevity, seasonal eating, rapamycin, Senolytic supplements, parasites, is running a good exercise, zone 2 training, and things he's changed his mind on in the past few years. So enjoy the show. Here is Siim Land. All right, we're here with Siim Land. Welcome to the show.
I'm glad to speak with you, Matt.
Yeah, this will be a lot of fun. Seems like we've researched a lot of the same stuff. I always see your reels, I think they're called, popping up on my YouTube feed. So you're making a lot of different videos and a lot of different stuff. I think recently I like the one you made on melatonin in response to the Andrew Huberman video, because he's one of the biggest anti-melatonin proponents. I think Jack Cruz is another one. And
right.
You were kind of breaking down the myths around it. And yeah, that's a subject I find a lot of people, it's one you kind of have to devote a lot of time to kind of sift through the BS and find what's actually going on with it. So,
yeah, I mean, some of the, let's say, fear is warranted. You know, melatonin does affect puberty and it can affect testosterone and sex hormones and stuff like that. And even in like large doses, it can have like contraceptive effects. But I guess like most people, taking 1 to even 3 milligrams is not going to have like any adverse effects on their sleep or melatonin production. And even like in 50 milligrams a day, it doesn't really disrupt the natural melatonin production. So yeah, I mean, some of it is warranted, but again, yeah, even like just a few Google searches or PubMed searches, you can find yourself some clarifications quite quickly.
Yeah. I never like to get all my information from one guy or one research paper, but Russell Ryder, if I had to choose, would be the one. And he had a paper that in the abstract, it just point blank said only 5% of the melatonin's made in the pineal gland, and the rest, 95%, is made throughout the body and all the cells. That's a big misconception. And then, with the high dosing, it's interesting because he's in his 80s and he looks like he's in his maybe 60s, and he's been high dosing melatonin for like over 20 years. I wonder how his hormones are looking, but he recommends, anyone, I think it was over the age of, as we age, we make less melatonin. So basically increasing your dose as you age, which made sense to me. So,
yeah, I personally, covertly, I don't think it publicly, but covertly, I think that, melatonin macrodosing might have like some pretty powerful effects in terms of slowing down the aging, because, you make a lot of melatonin when you're a child. Like you make almost like 10 times or 20 times more melatonin compared to your elderly years. And, part of the reason maybe that you stay young before puberty is also because of the high melatonin. I don't know. That's kind of my own kind of thought.
The interesting theory. Yeah. So kind of the stereotypical intro here. How did you get into health, and did you have like a car wreck or a major health ailment that kind of woke you up, or was it
Mm.
like me and you just got interested in it just kind of out of the blue?
Yeah, well, I never had any health issues. I started, researching biohacking and just health in general around maybe like 19 years of age. I got out of the military, or before the military, I was exercising and staying fit and stuff like that. I was never obese or anything, or never fat either. But after the military, I got a lot into like fitness, so like gym and workout stuff like that. I just researched about different diets, how to optimize body composition and muscle growth and those kind of things. That's the time I started doing like intermittent fasting, because that was pretty popular back in like 2013, 14 era. And yeah, from there I stumbled upon different kinds of biohacking channels or podcasts or books and stuff like that. Tim Ferriss 4 Hour Work, the 4 Hour Body, and Dave Asprey, and those kind of just regular, very basic level biohacking, books and stuff like that. I stumbled upon those, and over the course of multiple years, I just got deeper into these topics. Back in like 2017 and 18, I was a lot into keto and intermittent fasting, and since 2020 or something like that, I shifted more towards specifically on like longevity and anti-aging, because I always create content about what I like the most. Like I don't have any responsibilities in front of other people in terms of that or my content creation. I just make content that I like, and I talk about the topics that I like. And yeah, like now it is just longevity and anti-aging, because it's kind of preventive healthcare. One of the reasons I got into like preventive healthcare and longevity is because one of my grandfathers died when he was 36 to a colorectal cancer, which was like a long time ago. I never like met him, and this was just something that made me want to take care of my health and not die prematurely myself. So I guess that's the story.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, it's perfect for this show because the topic is longevity and anti-aging. And yeah, I've been researching that for many years as well. I think I'm going on 14 years of study. And I remember the backlash years ago where people would just judge you for being into this topic of anti-aging longevity. It's like, what do you mean? Just live your life. Just, eat, eat whatever you want and just enjoy your life. You'll live longer with that strategy than doing all the biohacking and the supplements. And I've heard this over and over again.
Yeah.
And my current belief is it's kind of a blend of those two worlds. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, first of all, I don't believe that we're in this like longevity escape velocity that we're gonna become immortal in the next 20 years or something. I don't believe that. I do believe that maybe within the next few decades we might add like a decade or two to the average life expectancy for humans. So most people, the average life expectancy is increasing in the entire world. In the past, most of this progress is because of wiping out or reducing a lot infectious diseases and infant mortality, but still we're making like slow progress even in like the chronic diseases. So I think that we're not going to become immortal. It's almost like philosophically impossible to become immortal, I think. But I do believe that, if you ask people like, okay, do you want to live 10 years longer? They'll say, sure, why not? If you ask 20, less and less people will say yes. But when you say like 100, then there's going to be maybe like 5% of people will say yes. But if you say live forever, then very few people actually would like to do that. Only like a few of these crazy biohackers want to like literally live forever. So, yeah, it's a kind of a, because it's like a social stigma or taboo a little bit. It doesn't really matter because I don't think we can live forever. But yeah, like I think adding 10 to 20 years to life expectancy is pretty like reasonable.
Have you heard of Li Ching Wen? That's like the 256-year-old man, like the living on Chinese herbs, and you hear a lot of these different legends. And I always question, how would we know if someone does live that long? Because couldn't they just kind of change their identity and just keep?
Mm. Yeah, the oldest living person right now in history is this French woman, Jeanne Clement, if I'm not mistaken, is the last name, and she lived 121. They thought that her daughter like faked her mother's ID. So it was her daughter actually who lived until that long. And so the mother already passed away many decades ago. It was their daughter who like changed her ID to be a fake being her mother to get like pensions or something like that. It's pretty common in like a lot of these blue zones that people fake their grandparents' IDs and get free pensions. So I wouldn't be surprised if, someone who is claiming to be 200 years old or something that is actually some grandchild or something. But yeah, I mean, we don't really know. Like we don't have, that good of a track record of the past. And there's also the issue that the way you measure years also varies between cultures, I guess. In the like Native American tribes, I guess they look at time and years and these timelines in humans differently. So they could be 200 years old, but 1 year for those tribes is like 6 months or something like that.
Right. Yeah, and it in the Bible, I think they talk about people living 900, 1,000 years old, like it was nothing. Methuselah and trying to think of some other some crazy names in there. But I wonder if the Earth used to be different back in the day, and that was the average life expectancy. It was like 1,000 years old, and then it's gone down. That's one theory from like the biblical perspective that I think is fascinating.
Right. Yeah, well, that would require, in the reason why the life expectancy has increased over the past century or so is because of reduction in infant mortality and infectious diseases. And in the past, those were the things that got you the most. Like people didn't live so long that they would get heart disease or cancer or Alzheimer's. They would mostly die, a bit sooner. At least the average life expectancy, like up to like 60% of hunter-gatherer children will die before they're 15 years old. So it's like, a lot of children just die because of whatever reason, like they can't breathe properly when they're born, or they just, scratch a leg and they get infected and stuff like that. So it's modern medicine has been good and like it has made a lot of breakthroughs just because of wiping out the infant mortality, at least in like the developed parts of the world.
Mm-hmm. I've heard like dental too, like dental care was a big step forward. And, because if you have infection here, it could reach your heart, reach your brain. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of problems there. So, well, let's see how long do you plan to live for, I guess, is a question I have for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Estonia, and the average life expectancy in Estonia is 78, if I'm not mistaken. And my grandparents, I mean, like no one in my family is very long lived. Like I don't know anyone in my family who's over 80 years old. All of them have died like in their 70s or something like that. So I don't have like, great longevity genetics. And, genetics is the most powerful thing that determines how long you're going to live, even if you follow like unhealthy lifestyle. But, I do think that I'm taking care of myself very well. I have the knowledge and expertise to take care of my own health and body. And, who knows what the next few decades are going to bring. But, I would say that if I get to 80, then that's good, around the 80s. I think that's a kind of low estimate, obviously, based on right now in the year 2023. But if there is like every year, there is some minor increase in average life expectancy, then maybe like, 90, 95, I don't think that's, out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I think you'll make it there pretty easily. It's interesting in the health community, like epigenetics is emphasized, and you can control your genes, and it's all about your lifestyle. But I'm with you that genetics is the most powerful thing, or one of the most powerful things that determines how long you're going to live. I recently interviewed Dr. Tyler Pansner, and he uses Self-Decode and other websites to coach his clients to like personalized supplementation and stuff like that. Um, it sounds like you've delved into that quite a bit, looking at your genetic mutations and.
Mhm. Yeah, I haven't done like a whole genome sequencing, which I guess is the most accurate way to know. I have used the Celtic Code and a few other companies. Um, based on my family history, then the biggest ones are like the colorectal cancer risk. Although like my grandfather didn't have like a particularly healthy lifestyle, I don't know the details of how he died. All I know is that he died to colorectal cancer at 36. I do think that he smoked. He was like a sailor, so I guess he had like an unhealthy lifestyle in the Soviet Union as well. So like the average life expectancy in the Soviet Union wasn't that high anyway. But like the thing is also that his brothers, so he had two brothers, both of them died to thrombosis in their 40s, something around that age. So it's like I have like pretty bad genetics from my father's side or my grandfather's side. The other side of the family is both of the grandparents were in the 70s. Grandfather died in 72, but he drank quite a lot of alcohol, so he wasn't healthy either. And my grandmother, she's pretty heavy smoker all her life. So she's like 75 right now. She's not like in great health, but I don't really know like what would be like my potential in terms of like how long I could live. I guess most of my grandparents have died because of poor, unhealthy lifestyle. And I do think that there might be some increased risk of cancer and heart disease or thrombosis. And for that, besides from, following the main general like healthy lifestyle interventions, I don't do like anything specific. So for, cancer, I do plan to get a colonoscopy to screen for the colorectal cancer in my like 30s or something like that, because early detection is the most important thing for any kind of cancer. And given the grandfather's death to colorectal cancer, then that's what I'm gonna be like focusing on, especially around in my 30s. I'm 29 right now, so like in a few years I'll probably do one, and then monitor it in a few year interval, kind of like that. With heart disease, I think you can very easily prevent that and keep track of it with just looking at your blood work. So, there's a lot of different opinions about cholesterol and things like that, and lipids and ApoB and triglycerides. I do think that having like super high cholesterol levels probably, at least if you're in high risk, or at least there's no like additional health benefits to having like super high cholesterol. So I'll just try to keep a normal cholesterol levels, try to keep my like ApoB levels lower, obviously not develop any like insulin resistance or high blood pressure, and no like metabolic syndrome and those things, which is relatively easy to manage. You just keep a healthy body weight and exercise regularly and eat a kind of good diet. Fortunately, I don't have the ApoE4 alleles that would put me in the high risk category for Alzheimer's and heart disease from saturated fat intake. So I'm fine to eat saturated fat intake, but over the past few years, I have noticed that like my dietary intake of like meat products and saturated fat does affect my cholesterol levels. So like, let's say in 2019, it was maybe around 150 milligrams per deciliter LDL. And that was the time where I was eating more like a heavier meat-based diet. Since then, I've reduced my like meat intake. I'm eating more plant-based and olive oil and fish, and I do eat meat obviously, but not in like larger quantities. And right now, like my LDL is around 100, so I think it's a better thing. I didn't measure my ApoB back then, which is a bigger predictor of or bigger risk factor for cardiovascular disease than LDL. But my ApoB is also right now in like the 90th percentile, so like the 10% of the optimal, so it's below 60. I guess that's what I'm doing right now in terms of my biggest like risk factors.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have no affiliation with this company, but I recently started experimenting. I'm always trying new supplements, and like this one Arturasil HP, it's like it's supposed to protect the inner lining of the vascular system by restoring the endothelial glycolics, but it's super pricey. It's like $90 for
Mm.
for a
Mhm.
bottle. But it's pretty interesting. It's basically green seaweed extract, and then with just a bunch of tomato, broccoli, just like a blend
Mm.
of a bunch of other stuff. But I think the main ingredient is the seaweed, that I guess has this compound that supports that system. So I think I'm prone to some of that as well that I saw in my self decode. So I was like, oh, I might as well just start taking this now and see. And
Mm.
um,
Yeah, I'm also into like saunas a lot. So like obviously in the
mhm.
Estonia and the Nordics, taking a lot of saunas, and that's based on the research after like exercise and being like a good body composition, then the saunas appears to be one of the biggest, one of the most powerful things for reducing the risk of heart disease and heart disease mortality and Alzheimer's risk as well. So like I take the sauna like very frequently.
Yeah, all cause mortality. I think I saw my friend Bob reposted your post on that. You were going through all the percentages of,
Mm.
like you said, take the sauna as seriously as you would exercise, minimum three
Yeah,
times a week or something like that. And
yeah. The
it's good.
maximum,
Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, the maximum benefits are like 4 times a week. So compared to once a week, doing the sauna 4 times a week reduces all cause mortality by 40%, and heart disease risk by 63%, and Alzheimer's and dementia risk by 66%. But that's compared to once a week. So imagine 0 times per week compared to 4 times per week, then that association must be like even a bit greater. The thing is that in Finland, like almost everyone does the sauna where these studies are done mostly, and they say that in Finland there's as many saunas as there's people, and that there's like 5 million people in Finland, and like literally almost every apartment and every gym, every spa, every office building almost has a sauna, so it's part of the culture. And I think that's also like a good case study, Finland, to look at this, because many people would say that it's like healthy user bias, like only rich people get access to the sauna. Well, in Finland, everyone has access to the sauna. Even like if you're homeless, you get access to the sauna and you can use it. So it's not really. Maybe it would be the case in US. So if the study was done in US, that greater sauna use is associated with reduced mortality. Well, in the US, most people who take the sauna are like health conscious, and they have like the means or the resources to get access to the sauna. But in Finland, like everyone has the sauna.
That's pretty cool. Wow. Yeah, I used it. I have a wood burning one because I'm fully off grid here in Idaho, and just the barrel sauna with the stones, and you have to build the fire. And I used it for the first time in probably a year yesterday because I've just been so busy with my business and just life and a bunch of stuff. And I kind of got on the back burner. I felt the difference. I mean, even just one session yesterday, and I just felt my mind was clear. I slept better, more energized. I'm
Yeah.
curious, the studies you referenced that most being done in Finland, do you know, like I would imagine that means that they were done with the traditional
Mhm.
saunas, like wood burning versus these, $10,000 US biohacking far infrared saunas.
Mm. Yeah, I mean those studies are on the traditional Finnish sauna, which is the wood burning and with the stove in the middle, and you throw the water on the stove. And I would say, I think the infrared sauna theoretically still has the same metabolic effect. So like the reason why the sauna has these health benefits is through hyperthermia. So it raises your body temperature and causes a mild fever. So it mimics fever. So like, during exercise, you also raise your body temperature, and exercise also increases these heat shock proteins the same way the sauna does. So yeah, the way the sauna works is through like just heating up your body and causing this mild fever. The health benefits start when your body temperature rises around like into like the 38 degrees Celsius, which is like, actual like a pretty high fever normally, but in the sauna, it's like simulated, or you're mimicking that. And usually in the studies, the temperature to achieve that is 70 degrees Celsius, which I guess is around 190 or 95 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere between there. and I need to double check that. But yeah, it's the 70 degrees Celsius that is usually the dose or the temperature that gives those benefits. And the infrared saunas, they do reach that temperature. I mean, most of the infrared, at least my infrared, I have infrared as well, that reaches 60 degrees Celsius the most. But I mean, if you still sweat, you still raise your body temperature. And I would imagine you still get similar health benefits. So it's not that the Finnish sauna is somehow magical. It's very traditional and it's amazing. I do like the traditional sauna a lot more than the infrared sauna as a experience. But I guess the effect is from the elevation of the body temperature.
Interesting. Yeah, I Googled it. So 70 Celsius is 158 Fahrenheit.
Okay.
And yesterday in the session, I don't know if the thermometer is accurate. I mean, it's a couple years old now, should be, but I think it was getting up to 140 Fahrenheit, and I was still drenched. I still felt the benefits.
I do feel that in the infrared, I start to sweat a lot faster because of the infrared wavelengths. So I guess the infrared probably heats your body faster. So, the infrared goes deep into the body and warms your body up from the inside out. Whereas with the traditional sauna, you do need to actually have the temperature higher for your body temperature to rise. So I guess, with the infrared, you can have a lower temperature inside the sauna cube because your body itself is heating up faster.
Did you say you have both, or you use both, the wood burning and the electric?
Yeah, I have a regular traditional sauna and an infrared sauna as well. So yeah, sometimes, because the infrared sauna, just you plug it in and then it's warm in 45 minutes or something. Whereas with the traditional sauna, you need to heat it up for an hour and a half or something like that for it to get warm.
Mine's only, I'd say 15, 20 minutes and it's cooking. It's pretty good. Maybe it depends on the design, but I used a company called Redwood Outdoors, no affiliation, but I
have a bigger sauna. I have a pretty big, for the entire family, it's gonna fit 6 people or 8 people.
Oh, cool.
So that's why it takes longer.
And do you do the back and forth, going to cold and then back and forth? Do you think there are exercise mimicking benefits to doing that? Or
that's much less studied. I haven't found any actual studies looking at the heat to cold alteration. Cold exposure itself mostly has all, this ice dipping and ice swimming, ice water, cold water swimming. That mostly has immune system benefits. So it strengthens immunity, it increases glutathione levels and lowers inflammation. So it can be good for some sort of soreness and joint pain and those kind of things. But I haven't noticed any studies themselves looking at, what happens if you combine the two. But I do pretty much every time possible, I do like to combine it. So if it's winter time or something, then, you can even just roll around in the snow and get the same effect. But usually if there is a lake around, or I do have a cold tub as well, so I'll just jump in there after maybe 15 to 20 minutes of the sauna. I'll go into the cold water for a few minutes and a few rounds of that. And it feels like one of the best feelings ever. It just feels super, super amazing once you're doing that.
Have you always lived in a place with snowy winters, with real winter?
Yeah, I've lived in Estonia all my life. I did spend 1 year as an exchange student in college in UK. But I didn't do sauna back there. So, but other than that, I've lived in Estonia all my life.
Yeah, I tried to live somewhere in southern latitude, like Southern California. That's where I grew up for 30 years. But then being up here in North Idaho, a couple hours from Canada, pretty close, we get real winters, especially at the elevation and just the microclimate. And I can't go back. I don't know if there's a genetic component there. I'd imagine there is. 60% Italian, northern Italian. So I think there's something there, but just living in a cold climate, not even immersing myself in cold water or jumping in the snow, just going outside all winter and feeling that blast of cool air on my face, for 4, 5, 6 months. I can't go back. And I think I think that alone has benefits. That's one thing I'd like to see more research on, is just, not even having to do these biohacking things, just living in a cold climate,
Mm,
getting that hitting the nerves in your face and getting that effect, if
right.
that's similar.
Mm, yeah. Well, they do find that lower body temperatures are linked to some aspects of longevity, but I don't think that it has to do with like cold exposure itself. And taking ice baths probably doesn't have like massive lifespan extended effects. But yeah, I mean, just because of having a stronger immune system and lower inflammation levels, it certainly has some benefits.
Mm-hmm. Are you a coffee enjoyer for longevity?
Yeah, I mean, I do think I mean, I drink coffee usually like 1 to 2 cups a day, and yeah, even not even like outside of the studies, then I do think I enjoy it, and like I find it healthful. I mean, and besides that, there's like a lot of studies as well finding that coffee consumption is linked to reduced all-cause mortality and reduced cardiovascular disease mortality, which is always triggers people like who are saying that coffee is bad because of XYZ. But yes, but if the final outcome is that you still live longer, then I guess it's worth it, even if you get some people might get negative side effects. And that's with a lot of these other longevity studies, like what's the final outcome? Like if people live longer and they have less disease, then it's good enough, I think.
Oh yeah, and I think prevents or reduces the risk of colorectal cancer as well.
Yeah, that's true. And liver cancer as well.
Wow. Um, do you just imbibe orally? You don't do coffee enemas or anything crazy?
No, although like maybe that would be especially beneficial for colorectal cancer, but I haven't done that. Maybe I'll do it in the future, but I don't. I mean, I have a good digestion. I don't have any like never have any like constipation or indigestion or anything like that. But yeah, and it's interesting because when you look at the studies, then any type of coffee appears to have the benefits. So regular ground coffee with caffeine, ground coffee with decaf, and even instant coffee has some mortality risk reduction benefits. So any kind of caffeine or coffee with the polyphenols apparently has some of those longevity benefits. And the only exception is that, there might be some issues with unfiltered coffee that might raise LDL, which again, depends on the person who you ask whether or not it is a problem. But filtered coffee apparently filters out some specific compounds. I don't remember the exact name of those, but those compounds can elevate your cholesterol levels. But I drink filtered coffee regularly.
Yeah, I think heavy metals as well. I saw an article on that a while back, but that's funny about the instant coffee. In our health community, there's the whole mold free, lab tested, mycotoxin free coffee products, and I think a lot of that's marketing. I mean, if someone feels better on it, great. I just think we have to remember that if it's coming from a good farm that's doing things right, it's not like super large scale operation. It's going to be high quality. I don't think we need to go, lab test every batch of beans and go to that level. That's a relatively new phenomenon that's been happening. So, yeah, I home roast my own beans, espresso shots with filtered water. And I think that's one of the best ways to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think supplements are another like focus of yours. And I think from watching some of your videos, our beliefs differ on a bunch of things, which is a beautiful thing. That's natural. But I think you emphasize glycine is one of them. I believe creatine, not mistaken. And then I forget, there's like a few more that I was seeing in your videos that you really like.
Yeah, I mean, glycine is pretty much my favorite and one of my top supplements. Combine that with the NAC, the GlyNAC combo. The thing that got me very excited about it was that, there's been like, I don't know, 6 human clinical trials where they see that the GlyNAC in the elderly people reduces like the hallmarks of aging and improves functional outcomes of aging, like muscle strength, gait speed, and body composition, and cognition even, and those kind of things. So it just targets like the main hallmarks of aging through like elevating glutathione levels. And in the elderly, it is especially important because the elderly have significantly higher oxidative stress levels as a baseline. Even like healthy older people have higher oxidative stress than compared to like younger individuals. And they also have lower glutathione levels. And the GlyNAC supplementation helps to reverse that. Like it raises the glutathione levels back up and improves like all these outcomes. And glycine as a molecule, amino acid, has like all the other health benefits, like collagen turnover, creatine synthesis, heme synthesis, helps lower blood sugar, helps with sleep. And from a longevity side, then it like balances the methionine, which is an amino acid that in large amounts in animal species has been found to shorten lifespans. And glycine like counterbalances that or buffers against that. And yeah, like glycine is just sweet as well, so you can add it to coffee. And what else is not to like about it?
Yeah, that's interesting about the methionine thing. The carnivore diet is still really popular and trending. And do you think it's funny that that's being recommended as the way to eat for everybody is the natural human diet, when we have these genetic factors that you mentioned earlier with ApoB and different things? Carnivore is probably not for everybody, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly like some people might do better with it because of various reasons. Other people might not so much because of genetic factors, or I think most people, like would be able to follow it. And even some, anecdotally, many people say that it works for them in terms of weight loss, improving like well-being and energy and mood and body composition and all those things. But I guess, the most important thing is how is your blood work? I'm like very agnostic about a diet. I don't believe in any like particular diet. I've done many different types of diets in my past, but right now I'm at a point where, any diet can work, within a certain framework. Like you need to get the diet right, only like, 80% or something like that, or even less. Like you can get in very excellent health only if you get your diet like 60% right, and 40% is like garbage. Because, I think, you need to get the calorie intake approximately right, that you don't become obese by overeating calories. You don't also want to become too frail, undernourished. And you need to get the certain amounts of micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. But after that, you don't need to like super micromanage that. And at that point, it comes down to your blood work. So how is your like ApoB or LDL or triglycerides or blood glucose or inflammation levels, whatever, blood cells. So, at the end of the day, like the outcome is what we should want, not like the way to get to the outcome in terms of like longevity. There's the saying that enjoy the journey, don't focus on the final destination when it comes to like business or success. But in health, I feel like it's actually the opposite. You should want to focus on the outcome, like focus on being in optimal health and living longer rather than the process of getting there. Like don't focus on the grinding workouts or the massive amounts of supplements or other biohacks or dietary protocols you follow, or making sure that you're grounded always. Like that's kind of just the journey to get to the final outcome that matters a lot more. So the state of being healthy and being in optimal blood work and having energy and, feeling great, that's kind of the final thing that matters. And, how it doesn't matter how you get there. There are certain ways that get there faster. Other ways might get there, you might get there through adjusting some of your supplements or adjusting your diet or exercise, whatever it is. But, that's what the end goal should be, to be like in this great health with at least all the biomarkers being in like, the clinical optimal ranges.
That's a great point. So you opened up Pandora's box there. So optimal ranges, because this is something that I talked to with guests on the show. It seems like the reference ranges are kind of always changing. We know like with vitamin D, which I'm not against. I used to be anti D3 supplementation. I'm not anymore because of genetics. But the like the 25D, for example, the bar keeps raising. So like what is optimal? And they say that's because of, the general health of the world on the decline. And so we're going to need more vitamin D to kind of counterbalance that.
Right.
But what are your thoughts on that, on the reference ranges, because they're averages, right? Based on populations, and how accurate are these numbers that we're going by, say for vitamin D or ferritin? Because, for example, people I talk to, they have it's a female with single digit ferritin and they feel amazing. I'm like, great, you don't have to do anything. But then there's women with single digit ferritin that feel like they're dying. And then same thing with vitamin D, hovering, around in the 20s and feeling awesome. And it's like, great, So how do you, is that just back to genetics, you think, or?
Yeah, well, I guess there is no, because we don't know what is the actual like most optimal for any of these biomarkers, because it might vary between your gender, might vary between your age. So for different age groups, there's different like ranges that are optimal. And even like the centenarians, so they look at the blood work of the centenarians, then most of it is pretty good. Like there's obviously some variety between there, but I guess the point is that, it's still not healthy to have a blood sugar level of 120 or a fasting blood sugar 120. That's already characterized as prediabetes. And with LDL cholesterol, I would still argue that having like a LDL above 200 is probably still like maybe not something that you want to like gamble. Like, you only have one life. And do you really want to trust that one guy on Instagram who said that LDL of 200 is fine when all the other medical guidelines say otherwise? So it's like, obviously you can't always be inside the framework of the medical guidelines and the reference ranges for all these biomarkers, and you can rely on your health, on your like subjective feeling to a certain extent. But as a North Star, I guess the reference ranges that's what they are. Like they're a North Star. You don't necessarily have to be 100% on that direction, but at least they point in the general direction of where it should head. It's not really healthy to have a triglyceride. An example is that the cutoff point for triglycerides is like 150 milligrams. So if you're above 150, then that's considered high. But anything below 150 is fine. But I would say that anything below 50 is good, because that's generally healthier. Like there's less triglycerides in the bloodstream, and means that there's like less excess energy, and your body is burning those triglycerides rather than accumulating in the blood. And high triglycerides are a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So there is obviously some nuance to the reference ranges, and but as a general North Star, that's what I kind of use them for. And another example is like CRP, C-reactive protein. What they find is that the lower your CRP, then the better it is for reducing all-cause mortality risk. So even like 0.1 and less than that is most optimal. They find that the lowest mortality risk is based on that. And you can look at all these different studies for all these different biomarkers, albumin, hemoglobin A1C. They all find there is a certain reference range that is associated with the lowest mortality risk. And sometimes they are in the clinical reference ranges, and other times they're a bit different. With LDL, there is the U-shaped curve that low LDL levels are associated with increased mortality risk, and high LDL levels are associated with increased mortality risk. And the lowest mortality is somewhere between like 120 to 140 for most ages. But here is obviously also the issue that why does someone who has low LDL die? Well, generally it's because they have some sort of other medical condition that drops their LDL super low. So they're like pretty much near death, and that's why their LDL drops low. And there's other examples in different biomarkers as well, like hemoglobin A1C as well. If you're like super malnourished and you're not eating, then of course your blood sugar levels are going to be pretty low because of the severe calorie restriction, and you're not eating enough food. And then you experience higher risk of mortality because of that, because of the malnutrition, not because of the lower hemoglobin A1C. So of course, there's a lot of nuance, to this, but yeah, the reference ranges are kind of a direction, and then you can also look at some studies, what is the lowest mortality risk for various biomarkers.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Do you think it's a good strategy for people to get like I've done Inside Tracker, where I think they look at 40 or 50 markers, like get a general blood work test from whatever XYZ company, and then like find your weak links. Like if you have a CRP of like 10, which I used to have, then like delve into that and then zoom in and then get a test that can kind of expand on that, and then kind of follow that to its end to fix that issue. Do you think that's a good strategy for people just to do? Or
yeah, I guess depends of the person. So I believe in your case, you are already pretty much following all the basics right, and following a healthy lifestyle overall. So in your case, yes, you would want to delve deep into that and see, okay, what is the reason for that? Because it might be some sort of thing in your environment, thing in your diet, thing in your genetics, thing in your supplements, whatever that could give you that result. But if the person is the average American who is like with a BMI over 35 or something like that, then I don't think there is that much to gain from just honing in on one particular biomarker, because chances are everything will improve once you lose weight and start eating a better diet and exercise. So I guess it depends on the person, how healthy they are and how like serious they're already been with their biohacking journey and health journey. The more advanced they are, then the more like specific they need to be with the particular nutrient. Like, okay, why is my vitamin D low despite being outside and taking some supplements? Or why is my CRP high despite being relatively lean and eating a good diet?
That's great. Yeah. So you mentioned exercise, kind of want to circle back with that, but I did make a note. Smoking, I think you mentioned a few times, and I'm a tobacco enjoyer. Actually plan to grow it here on the property. And I think tobacco has a lot of benefits. It does have detriments, especially, chew tobacco, conventional cigarettes versus, cigars. But, obviously there's still harm that's done, oxidative stress that's created when we smoke anything, even if it's mullein growing outside here, whatever it is. Have you looked at the studies at smokers mitigating it using antioxidants like vitamin C and E, specifically like ascorbic acid and D-alpha tocopherol? Because when I search that, it's just tons of research that, vitamin C requirements of a smoker are, I think, 4 times increased or something like that from a non-smoker. So I wonder, your relatives probably weren't supplementing anything, right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think there were any supplements. But yeah, I mean, the smokers do experience higher oxidative stress, both chemical and like mechanical, that the smoke like damages the blood vessels and the lungs mechanically, and there's also the chemical side that causes DNA damage, which can lead to cancer. So, but yeah, like they do experience higher amounts of inflammation and oxidative stress as a baseline. So taking like some, antioxidants like might work. I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I might have seen like some studies that in smokers, like vitamin E intake was actually associated with like increased cancer, lung cancer. But I'm not sure. It might be something else. I might confuse it with something else. But in healthy general population, like using these antioxidants, vitamin C and vitamin E, is associated with a very small increase, relative risk increase in mortality. So like it's like 4 or 5%, which is like very small. But I guess the theory is that if you just eradicate all oxidative stress, then your body is a bit more vulnerable, or it doesn't increase its own antioxidant defense system. Because the antioxidants also blunt the benefits of exercise. So if you take like a ton of vitamin C or even NAC or any other antioxidant around exercise, or especially after exercise, then some of the benefits of exercise are mitigated. And it's the concept of hormesis, that small amount of stress makes the body stronger, and exercise is a positive hormetic stressor that causes oxidative stress and inflammation in the short term, but your body super compensates for that by boosting its antioxidant defense systems. And that's why part of the reason why exercise is associated with just reduced mortality and better health outcomes across the board. So I don't think that like large dose antioxidants in healthy people is a smart idea. So like if you're just living your everyday life and you don't particularly experiencing a cold or infection or COVID or whatever other high inflammatory, high oxidative stress state, then it's not really like worthwhile to take large amounts of antioxidants, or you just don't need it. And in some other cases where you are, like in the elderly who have low glutathione levels, then for them taking large amounts of NAC with glycine has been shown to work quite well. And I would imagine like in smokers or some other, let's say these pathological states like diabetes or obesity, then in those cases, yes, like antioxidants would probably be a net positive for those individuals.
We'll agree to disagree there. That's okay. I don't like to debate my guests, but I appreciate the points you make. Exercise. So like exercise for longevity, it seems like another topic that people debate all the time. And what I see now on social media and just the natural health community, it's like everybody should have 6-pack, look like Arnold, to live a long life. Like the more muscle, the better. That seems like an imbalanced perspective just from a gut intuitive level. Curious what you think about that.
Yeah, well, I guess the 100-year-olds don't have 6-packs, and they're not like mountains. But lean muscle tissue itself is associated with reduced mortality risk and greater survival. But I guess the issue is, people have to realize that, just because the higher muscle mass in like the elderly is linked to greater survival doesn't mean that those individuals are particularly training for that muscle or that they have a bunch of muscle. It's just that compared to the other elderly people, they have just a higher amounts of lean tissue, which is a sign that they're just healthier overall. They might have a better diet. They're getting better like amounts of protein. They might engage in some more physical activity that maintains the muscle tissue more. And the people with the lowest muscle tissue, they're individuals who are sick. They have some comorbidities already. They're either like immobile, they can't exercise, they can't move. They're sarcopenic, they're frail, they don't have good nutrition. So, they're comparing those people to these frail people. So that's why the higher muscle tissue is associated with greater life expectancy and longevity. So it's not that these people are particularly super doing bodybuilding workouts or stuff like that, but they do have more muscle tissue, which at least, is just a sign that, okay, muscle tissue matters. You don't want to be super skinny and frail. But I do agree that social media has, at least in the few years, many of these longevity gurus and biohackers do emphasize that you need to have a bunch of muscle mass, and you need to add a bunch of muscle mass. You can't even do fasting anymore because you're going to lose muscle mass. So you just need to hold on to the muscle mass as much as possible. But there's first of all, you're not going to have those kind of issues if you just maintain good health. Like even if you don't particularly eat super high protein, if you're a healthy individual, then you will have already adequate amount of lean muscle mass in your 80s and 70s, just by virtue of being healthier and maintaining this adequate nutrient intake. But I mean, there is, obviously some benefits to doing that deliberately as well, because with age, you see a natural decline in muscle mass. So it's like, 10% per decade, starting around in your 30s even. So, if you start at a higher baseline, so in your 30s, you have a bit more extra muscle mass compared to the average person, then once you reach your 70s and 80s, then you're still above the baseline, which I would imagine is healthier than being below the baseline, for example. So, you're always going downwards. It's like it's all downhill after 30s. That's just what people say, that all the hormones go down with age, all the muscle strength, VO2 max, muscle mass starts to decline in 30s, you can only slow down the decline. And if you slow down the decline well enough, then you do see, at least it's very logical that you would also add a few healthy years to your life expectancy by doing that. So I do think that's a valid strategy to try to maintain lean muscle tissue. Do you need to become like a super bodybuilder and add a bunch of muscle tissue? Then I don't think so. There is the issue of having too much just mass itself as well. Of course, excess body fat can be harmful, but excess muscle mass as well, it's just going to wear out the organs and also cause like enlarged heart, which just leads to heart failure eventually. So and when you look at the BMI studies, BMI is a very poor tool. It has a lot of flaws. It doesn't take into account muscle mass particularly, but you can see that in people in their 40s, the ones with a BMI between 21 to 25 have the lowest mortality risk, and anything above 30 starts to reduce life expectancy by 2 to 4 years, and anything above 40 reduces it by 8 to 10 years. So you don't really want to be with a BMI above 30, even if you have muscle mass, because if you do have, let's say, a BMI of 30, and your argument is that I have muscle mass, so I'm still healthy, then you either have too much body fat, or you actually just are overweight in that scenario. Because even if you are muscular, then your BMI above 30 would indicate that you have a bit too much body fat, and that's still not healthy combined with the excess amounts of lean muscle tissue. So I would still recommend to like gravitate more towards like the optimal BMI and trying to maintain like a muscular and a leaner side physique. That's the healthiest, I think. Not too big, not too bulky, but not too fat or not too much body fat either.
Do you think if someone's homesteading and they have farm animals, say goats or chickens, cows, tending to a garden, pushing a wheelbarrow, chopping wood, carrying water, carrying wood, do you think those people could still benefit and increase longevity by doing, strategic high intensity weight, training or aerobics or something like that, in addition to all the natural movements that come with living on a farm?
Well, granted that from a muscle size perspective, then you can easily achieve that if you just maintain an adequate protein intake as well, because for muscle growth, you don't need like a massive stimulus. You just need a proper amount of stimulus and then also sufficient protein intake. So if you have a higher protein or adequate protein intake combined with that, then you will, like easily maintain that pretty, for pretty long. Because I mean, the longevity of side of it matters more. So how consistently are you able to do it, or for how long? Because, it doesn't matter what you do in your 30s if you stop doing it in your 50s or 60s. So, it actually matters more what you do in your 60s in terms of maintaining muscle. Because right now, both of us, we don't have any risk of really losing a lot of muscle unless we're in a juice fasting diet for multiple weeks or something like that. The muscle loss starts to be a problem more in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And 80s. So that's where it matters a lot more to make sure that you're maybe doing some form of resistance training, but the protein intake is kind of more important. Interestingly enough, when you compare muscle strength versus muscle mass, then muscle strength is associated with greater mortality reduction than muscle mass. So muscle strength is a lot more important than muscle mass. And what they find is that the individuals with low muscle strength have up to 2 to 3 times increased mortality risk, whereas individuals with low muscle mass have around 1.2, 1.5. So it's almost double for muscle strength. But obviously, if you have low muscle mass and low muscle strength combined, which is sarcopenia, then that's a little bit greater risk of mortality than low muscle strength. But the difference between strength and muscle size is the strength is more important when you look at head-to-head in isolation. So I think that the strength side is a lot more important because, strength is also more health related. you can have like a pretty high amounts of lean muscle tissue and still be obese and also still have like some health conditions. But if your strength starts to go away, then your health also starts, or it's a sign that your health is also deteriorating.
Mm. I think I saw a video where you're just celebrating your birthday. Mine was recently too. And were you hanging or were you doing some exercise to celebrate?
Yeah, I was doing 29 pull-ups for my
That's what it
29th
was.
birthday. Yeah.
That's awesome. Uh, Are you a fan of just like a lot of people are promoting like just hanging and you should be able to hang for 2 minutes or whatever they.
Yeah, I mean, hanging is a good locomotion, or it's a good way to keep your shoulders healthy. Obviously, it trains the grip as well. Uh, I would say that, if you don't hang at all in your exercise routine or any part of the, like, you go weeks without hanging from anywhere, then I mean, it can be a bit, let's say, not the best for your back or shoulder health in the long term. Like, I think it does, because it's such a good movement. It opens up the shoulders, decompresses the spine, and just is such a powerful way to like stretch out the entire body and to like open things up. So I think, do you think that just hanging from anything is a good thing? It does train your strength or your grip strength, and I like training pull-ups. They're like very functional. So calisthenics is also generally just a very healthy exercise, I think.
Mm. Are you a fan of like using resistance bands in lieu of heavy weights? Looked at any of the research on that? Or
Yeah, I have used the XP bar and the resistance bands. I think it's great, and it does replicate the gym pretty well. Like, once you become like more advanced or like pretty strong with, it's good for muscle growth for sure. Like, you just pump out a lot of reps and go to near failure or close to failure, and you will get the signal for hypertrophy quite well. For muscle strength, what I've noticed is that the barbells are a bit better, because depends how you train, obviously. But if I like to train more like powerlifting style with the barbell, then you just need to lower the bar a lot more. So you need to do like, let's say, 3 reps for a pretty good stimulus for muscle strength side and power. But you don't really get that with the X3 bar that much. You get a very nice hypertrophy signal with the X3 bar because of doing a lot more reps, even with the heaviest band. But it does translate obviously to strength as well to a certain extent. But if you're like training specifically for powerlifting or strength-based movements, then it's the barbells is generally the most effective way to do that, because you can like literally regulate to the gram or to the kilogram how much weight are you actually lifting, and it's easier to track progressive overload with that. So the most important thing for muscle growth and muscle strength is progressive overload. So are you getting stronger over time, and is your body experiencing greater mechanical tension over time? So let's say I start at 100 kilos with squats. If I still do 100 kilos 5 weeks later, then I haven't gotten stronger. So I still need to add more weights and do more reps or increase the weight, whatever it is, to get progress. And with the resistance band, yes, it certainly can. You can achieve that by doing more sets or stuff like that. But sometimes it's easier to just look at the bar and add a few more like plates to that.
mm-hmm. I haven't been to any health conferences in years, like biohacking conferences, because of COVID and stuff. But they have some machines now where I think it was like the ARX, that's like 60,000 US or something, and it's like all in one machine.
Yeah,
And that sounds convenient and nice. Because for me, it's kind of annoying to think that you need a whole gym, you need to have all these different equipment, set up. I do like the idea of only needing one thing to do the full body workout. It's
right.
kind of a nice thought.
Yeah, I've used the ARX once, and it's pretty intense. Like, you do like pretty much go to a full failure, and you're like shaking and shivering after that. It's a pretty effective way to get the stimulus. I haven't used it yet, like long term, to see how it would affect like muscle growth or muscle strength. During a conference, I obviously underate. I didn't eat like my normal amount of calories. So I think I'd actually lost muscle, or it might have been because of the like calorie restriction on that day. So like you're just going to such failure, and you would need obviously plenty of calories to support the recovery. But then the following days I was a bit like, I felt at least that I don't have that much muscle anymore. But I would need to use it, yeah, for a lot longer to see any actual effects.
Great. Sleep is another thing we haven't talked about that's really important for longevity. What do you spend like 1/3 of our life sleeping or something like that?
Yeah, if you sleep 8 hours, then that's going to be a 1/3.
Hmm. What do you have certain sleep strategy that you follow as far as going to bed at a certain time or sleeping grounded or blackout curtains, or is there a certain combination that you found over the years that works for you the best?
um One of the first things I tried back in like 2017 was like getting the blue blocking glasses, and I got the Oura Ring, the first generation Oura Ring as well around the same time. And what I did find was that after using the blue blocking glasses, my deep sleep increased like 15% just by doing that. And obviously the blue light has a big effect on melatonin production and sleep overall. So I think that has been, ever since pretty staple in my routine, that I do try to limit artificial exposure around like 1 hour before bed, and use blue blocking glasses, and also have like the pink Himalayan salt lamps and all the different kinds of stuff to dim down the lights. Other things I'm experimenting or have tried is not eating too close to bed. That has been like over the last year or two very like beneficial. So in the past I used to eat a bit later. I finished eating maybe like 2 to 3 hours, maybe 2 hours before bed. And right now I've stopped eating like 4 hours before bed, and the sleep quality is pretty like a lot better compared to then. So I think the food intake has pretty important effect on the sleep quality, and like especially like how many times you wake up per night. And interesting, you mentioned that melatonin is made throughout the body. A lot of the melatonin is made in the gut as well. So like it's like 400% more the nighttime melatonin production in the gut compared to daytime. So you don't want to have like, a bunch of food sitting there. It just doesn't make that much sense. And I feel like just going to bed slightly hungrier or having like an emptier stomach, just, I call it like, I feel like I'm reversing my aging in my sleep just by going to bed hungry and taking like larger amounts of melatonin, or even like a smaller dose of melatonin. It just feels like that, like I sleep very well, sleep very deep. In most cases, I sleep throughout the entire night without waking up at all. And that's just like very powerful. I do take melatonin as well, like on a regular basis. I might take like 0.1, 0.3 milligrams, not every night, but maybe 2 to 3 times per week I'll take the smaller dose, and maybe once or twice a week I'll take like 1 milligram dose. And usually on the days where I either slept bad the night before, or there was some sort of a mismatch in my regular routine or some circadian mismatch, then I'll take like a slightly larger dose, 1 milligram. But in most cases I'll just take the smaller dose as a way to like just increase the melatonin and get like the antioxidant and longevity benefits from that. Temperature is also quite impactful on the sleep and melatonin production. In the winter, I just open the window or something, and it's gonna be nice and chilly. But in the summer, just using either the chili pad or the 8 sleep mattress and stuff like that, they work very well as well in lowering the temperature of the bed and just enabling you to sleep. Because one of the biggest or one of the worst feelings in the summer is that it's just so hot and you can't fall asleep, and you're just twisting and turning in the bed, and you're like just hating life at that point. But the cold mattress is just really, really powerful in those scenarios.
We don't have AC here. Are you in the same situation? Do you have AC at your place? Central air?
No.
Okay.
It's not very common in Estonia.
Okay. Yeah, here in the summer, it's the way is just open the windows at night to cool it down, and then close them all first thing in the morning when you get up, you know.
Mm.
And generally that keeps it pretty good. I mean, the temperature will climb throughout the day. At some point, I need to get some type of mini split or something to cool down in the summer.
Mm.
It gets in like the low, well, I'd say mid 90s here, but it's only
Mm.
for like a month or so. So
Yeah.
those are great tips. There's something else I wanted to ask you. Talked about sleep. Trying to think before we go to the questions. Oh yeah, it was intermittent fasting. Do you have like an eating window that you follow, or?
Mm. Right now, I've been doing this my own version of intermittent fasting, where I have like a protein snack around 11 a.m. So it's consisting of usually like 1 scoop of whey protein, some collagen, and maybe like a carrot or piece of fruit or something like that. So like I'll generally get like 30 to 35, 40 grams of protein in there, and but it's only like very few calories. I like to just keep it light during the day. I don't like feel that productive eating, or I just start working and writing and stuff like after I wake up. Then I'll have like the snack of the protein, and this just keeps me in like the zone. There might be like some like this adrenaline or cortisol that you get from the fasting as well, but I don't know. I've been doing that for like 7 years, and it feels pretty good. And after that, I'll have a workout. And after the workout, I'll do the sauna, and in the dinner, which is usually around 5 p.m., then I'll have the kind of a dinner, which is gonna be like again some sort of a protein source with carbohydrates and vegetables. So I'll have like all my main carbohydrates and main calories after the workout, and then I'll stop eating around 4 hours before bed. So I guess the eating window is like 6 hours, but there's only like 2 meals in between there.
Okay, interesting. Have you experimented with eating higher carbohydrate? I know you said you tried a bunch of different diets, because some people swear by having honey before bed. I used to try ice cream before bed, and it seemed to help at first.
Mhm. Yeah, I eat a pretty high carbohydrate intake. I guess it's at least like 200 grams a day
Okay,
on the workout days. I do keep it lower carb on the rest days. So main carb sources are gonna be like fruits, like apples, bananas, pears, berries, blueberries, and sweet potatoes are great. Regular potatoes are my main source of carbohydrate. And sometimes I'll have like some ice cream as well or something, but it's usually on the days that are like heavier workouts. But I do have like a pretty higher carb intake, and my blood sugar is excellent. It's like 77 fasting blood sugar, and hemoglobin A1C is like 5% as well. I guess it's just it's the calorie balance is quite relevant. So like I'm still at a pretty low calorie intake, or compared to my physical activity levels and my body weight. I usually eat maybe like 2,000 or 2,200 calories per day. So I'm like 80 kilos, which I guess is like 185 or 190 pounds or something like that. And but I'm still like 7-8% body fat, and I have plenty of muscle as well. So I just burn all those calories and carbs for fuel.
Do you think eating seasonally is important? Like, do you eat bananas in the winter? Because some people say that's going to kill you, to eat fruit out of season, and it's going to throw off your circadian rhythm more than blue light and all this stuff.
Well, I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that, but I do eat seasonally, like it's kind of squash season, or I eat seasonally because I have like my own garden as well, and my mother grows different kinds of stuff. In the summer, we have our own greens and salads and strawberries growing from there. But I still eat some bananas in the winter and buy blueberries in the winter and stuff like that. So, that's what refrigeration is for. Like you can freeze blueberries and still eat them in the winter. And I guess, the modern wonders of the world still enable us to do that.
I've wondered too, if you have a greenhouse, like there's like geodesic domes where you can grow year round, even in the snow, like even tomatoes, is that still eating out of season if you're growing them in your environment in a greenhouse? There's a lot of questions to that, philosophy. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and you just have to look at the outcome in the real world. So like Iceland, they have a pretty high life expectancy. I guess it's even like in the 80s, one of the highest in the world. And they're like super up north. Environmentally they would be only able to eat like fish and salmon and sheep and dairy and stuff like that. But I imagine like most of the people in Iceland still eat, I don't know, oatmeal and bananas and strawberries even in the winter.
That's funny. I didn't know they had the highest life expectancy.
One of the highest. It's like in the 80s. Like the highest is like in Monaco, which is this kind of wealthy country in Europe, very small. It's like a tax haven for the rich, which is why they have high life expectancy, like they just wealthier. But Iceland is somewhere in the early 80s.
We started to watch, I think, the first episode. It's like a series, Live to 100, like the Netflix thing, and it was trending. Like a lot of people were posting about it. So we were like, oh, we'll check it out. And, it probably triggered the carnivores because it did emphasize, I think Okinawa, they eat a lot of sweet potato. I was like, but they did that, I think, because of a famine that they had. Like the sweet potato, like carried them through that famine. And then, obviously there's the Seventh-day Adventists in the Southern California area. And there's like 3 more zones. I can't remember where it was around the world.
Yeah, well, the blue zones, they're still nitpicked in the sense that it makes it seem that there's only like these 5 spots where people live, over 100 in the world, but there's actually like, dozens of them. They're actually called like, I think they're like Longerian zones is the actual, like in studies, they use the term. So this guy, I don't remember who the guy was who made the blue zones, but he just picked those 5 zones to create the blue zones. But there's, like Longerian zones, different like small pockets, like some villages in China and whatever, like that has also like high amounts of centenarians. So it's still the blue zone concept as a like this popular scientific concept is not real. It's it's not accurate in terms of what the actual situation is. That there's a lot more of these Longerian zones.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the takeaways I get from it is that there are a lot of beneficial compounds in plant products, and it doesn't mean go vegan or go vegetarian. It just means don't omit them from the diet, because obviously people are getting a lot of health benefits from them, especially longevity benefits. And I mean, you can't argue the research on cancer prevention and even treatment using plant compounds, right? Extracts and
for sure. Like, I guess the carnivore argument is that these are epidemiology studies and there's like food questionnaire studies, and they're not accurate. But yes, if it were like 1 or 2 studies, but there's like, I don't know, tens of dozens of studies finding the same kind of direction. Like I said earlier, the direction is indicating that plants are good for you, and these plant compounds are generally good for you. So
do you want to jump into the questions, Sim? Because we have a bunch. I'll pick
Sounds
the good ones here. Consuming fiber for longevity, or your general thoughts on fiber consumption?
So fiber consumption generally is associated with reduced mortality risk. And, the part of it might be because of like healthy user bias, that healthier or health conscious people eat more fiber because they think it's good for them. So it's like they follow these guidelines. So they also follow other healthy guidelines like exercise. But from a mechanistic side, then what you see with age is that your intestinal permeability increases, so the gut lining decreases, and that increases like the risk of these different kinds of viruses and pathogens. So you get more endotoxin in the blood and stuff like that. And obviously the main fuel for the intestinal lining is the short chain fatty acids, which come from fiber fermentation by the microbiome. yes, you could get that from like collagen and even like ketone bodies and fatty acids as well to a certain extent. But fiber still is the kind of main fuel source for those cell linings. So you could maybe try different versions, or you could try like different variations. Like you could try to eat collagen and butyrate, but I mean, like I don't see a reason why not to eat fiber. Depends on how much you should eat. I guess that varies. Some people might tolerate more, other people might tolerate less. But as a general guideline, and fiber is beneficial, I believe.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like going by feeling, a lot of people, especially that gravitate towards carnivore and diets like that are fiber free, say that fiber makes them constipated. Whereas for someone like me, it's the exact opposite. I went zero fiber and I got constipated. So it's funny that it's kind of different for different people.
Yeah.
What do you think about seasonal eating in context with deuterium? And I think to reword that, I think what he's saying is, carbs have the most deuterium. So, what do you think about eating a lot of deuterium in the summer? Not to answer the question, but I heard it's because sunlight breaks down deuterium is like one of the answers.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, then fat oxidation creates deuterium depleted water. So you're like when you're in ketosis in the winter, then you're creating this deuterium depleted water. But I mean, I guess the evidence for how serious the deuterium is still to be proven. Or, like we said, in the case of Iceland, they have very good life expectancy. They eat carbs. I guess they're not in ketosis for sure. They eat plenty of fatty foods and fish and stuff like that, but they're not in ketosis for sure. So, I guess the mechanisms matter only as much as the actual real living outworld outcomes do. Like, what's the actual outcome in the world? And I only care about the mechanisms to the extent of how they affect my health, and what's the other examples in the world of where these mechanisms could work or where they don't apply. So I guess the answer is that I don't think it matters that much.
There is a good book I recommend if you ever find it. So Defeating Cancer, the Biological Effect of Deuterium Depletion by Gabor Sommelier. That was an interesting read. And we have 3 cats, and that's one of my, I want them to live to like 30 or something crazy. And that's one of my strategies is giving them deuterium depleted water. And they drink it. So we'll see what happens with their longevity. But they're my experiment.
They should do the rapamycin. There's a study on rapamycin on dogs, so like house dogs, and they're trying to like extend lifespan of these house dogs. Maybe they should do one on cats as well.
That'd be great. I think you actually psychically picked up on one of the questions. My friend John said thoughts on rapamycin, so we could just go with that one.
Yeah, well, in animal studies, it's at least the most powerful life extension molecule. Like it can increase lifespan in like mice by up to 60%. There's obviously no human studies. There's very little like human, even clinical trials on anything. They usually use it for like kidney transplant patients and to prevent organ rejection. Because it's like thought to be immunosuppressive, they think it's going to increase your risk of infections. But what they found during COVID was that people who took, or the patients who took rapamycin, they didn't get more COVID. So I guess the fear about the immunosuppression is also not really that dangerous, or it might be in some other situations, but based on this finding that I guess it's not that serious as an immunosuppressive agent. Now, is it going to have any longevity effects? We're not sure in humans. I'm excited about the dog study for sure, but it's going to still take a few years to find like the results of that. So I personally think that yes, it probably has lifespan extending effects, at least in animals. In humans, maybe I would say like maybe I'm like 60% sure that it will. So I'm not like super in on it yet, but I'm kind of leaning on the side that it probably has some of those effects. But rapamycin still has some like negative side effects, particularly related to health span. So because it suppresses the growth pathway mTOR in the body, it can also increase the risk of frailty and sarcopenia, which we talked are pretty relevant for reducing mortality risk and increasing survival. So you don't really want to again gamble taking a lot of rapamycin or starting in your early 30s or 40s to start taking rapamycin, because in your 80s you might have a hip fracture that is going to kill you because you're too frail. So there's always like these trade-offs. There's nothing like a free lunch in anything health related or longevity related. So everything has trade-offs, and some things that are good for you in your youth aren't necessarily good for you when you're older. It's called this antagonistic pleiotrophy. So when you're young, you do want to grow a lot, and it doesn't affect your lifespan. But when you're old, then excess growth can give you cancer and can accelerate aging. So in some cases, like maybe in your 80s or something, you could take rapamycin as a way to mitigate the mTOR activation. But again, if it's going to have any significant effect depends on your health status. And there's no way to really measure mTOR activation in the body. The closest thing is to look at your IGF-1 levels. So insulin-like growth factor 1 is also like a major growth pathway in the body. It activates mTOR and makes you grow. So IGF-1 can make muscles grow, it can make cancers grow. And rapamycin works through inhibiting mTOR, so suppressing the growth signal. And it can reduce cancer development, but it also suppresses the muscle growth. So with IGF-1, there is also this U-shaped curve for mortality. So high IGF-1 levels are associated with increased cancer and all-cause mortality. And low IGF-1 levels are also associated with increased mortality, mostly because of frailty. I would imagine that you just are more susceptible to breaking a hip and sarcopenia. But also IGF-1 is needed for brain cell growth, and mTOR is needed for that. So if you have low IGF-1, then you could increase the risk of Alzheimer's or neurodegeneration. But if it's somewhere in the middle, in the sweet spot, then that's kind of generally the healthiest spot to be. So I guess if you need to take rapamycin would depend on your IGF-1 levels. At least right now, I would say so. Maybe in a few years, we would have more clinical trials. So at least short term, these randomized clinical trials that would see, okay, what is the effect of taking rapamycin even for a short time. There was one study as well on these people taking rapamycin off label, so recreational rapamycin users, these biohacker people, I guess, for life extension. And they find that, I made a video about it as well, but it was something like most of them thought that it worked, but they're not sure if it did work, or they didn't notice any benefits. But one of the biggest side effects that they noticed was mouth sores. So mouth ulcers was almost everyone experienced that. So that appears to be one of the side effects. But other than that, you don't experience a lot of other potential side effects.
Like cold sores, kind of, or?
Yeah, I guess it's like your mouth has been scratched from the inside, or the gums.
Interesting.
Stuff because I would imagine it's related to wound healing, so you have less wound healing potentially.
That is interesting, huh? Well, you mentioned mTOR, and it's stimulated by leucine and essential amino acids. Recently, Peter Diamandis, he's longevity guy. He made a post that was really triggering. The comments, people were just so angry. And he said one of Dr. Longo, Walter Longo's studies showed that people age 50 to 65 who ate high levels of protein were more than likely to die from cancer than people who ate low levels of protein. They also had 74% more risk of dying from any cause. And of course, all the carnivore people, the high protein people just went nuts, probably because they benefited from high protein, maybe because they were deficient their whole life. I was plant-based for 2/3 of my life. So getting protein was like a nootropic for me when I first started eating bison and stuff. So I could see how people get emotional about it if it helped pull them out of mental illness or depression or whatever it was. But
Mhm.
Yeah, that whole protein intake thing's really, really interesting because people will fight that to the death and say, no, more protein, the better.
Yeah, well, that is one of the main theories of aging, or one of the mechanisms of aging, that protein stimulates IGF-1 and mTOR. And the vegans will say that, yeah, like you should be fully vegan because plant-based protein doesn't have that many of these amino acids like leucine, or you would need like a lot more of plant-based protein to reach that amount. But the thing with mTOR is that carbohydrates and insulin also stimulate mTOR. So like even if you eat a high carb, low protein diet, then you're still activating mTOR. So there's really no way of getting around mTOR. Like almost everything will turn on mTOR, even like just calories. If you're eating like pure butter with with nothing else, then you're still turning on mTOR to a certain extent. So the mTOR activation isn't something that you can avoid. What I like to think of is that you want to activate mTOR only when it matters and only when it like benefits you. So you want to activate mTOR in the muscles because muscles are better for longevity, and you don't want to activate mTOR in like cancer cells. So like what determines where your body activates the mTOR depends on like the nutrient signaling and just overall energy status. So if you just exercised, then your exercise activated mTOR in the muscles, and then if you eat protein and carbs, then you're stimulating mTOR in the muscle cells, which is good for the recovery and the body composition. Whereas if you're eating the standard American diet with 6 meals a day, then you're spiking mTOR and insulin multiple times a day, and then of course it can increase the risk of cancer and accelerated aging. So the frequency of mTOR is what matters. So mTOR actually has like, there's not a like progressively increasing dose of mTOR activation the more protein you eat, because mTOR is mostly like on and off switch. Yeah, like you get 2.5 grams of leucine that already maximizes protein synthesis, and that activates mTOR pretty much as you are possible. So eating like 100 grams of protein doesn't really matter. It's the same activation of mTOR. So at that point, what matters mostly is just the eating frequency. How frequently are you activating the mTOR? So if you are, like a professional bodybuilder who eats 6 times a day as well, similar to the standard American diet, then that leads to the chronic activation of mTOR. And I think that's not like a healthy lifestyle to follow, like the pro bodybuilding diet, just by virtue of the mTOR activation side. So like doing intermittent fasting is the most effective way to suppress the mTOR activation. So if you spike mTOR like 2 to 3 times a day, then that's I think that's fine. And looking deeper into that, then from the protein side, then what they find is that the methionine restriction is the more relevant reason why the protein restriction appears to extend lifespan in animals. So methionine is this essential amino acid required for growth and metabolism, but excess methionine appears to like raise homocysteine, and it is associated with shorter lifespans in animal models. But what they find is that when you balance methionine with glycine, or you maintain the same methionine intake, but you bring glycine up with supplementation or increasing the glycine ratio in the diet, then there is no shortening of lifespan. So it's more of a matter of the balance between methionine and glycine that matters more than just the total protein intake. So yes, if you are eating a lot of steak only, like a lot of muscle meat, then you are getting mostly methionine, not a lot of glycine, like a little bit of glycine, but not enough. So the ratio matters more. So yes, you are getting you're getting like, let's say you're eating a pound of meat a day, you're going to get, 5 to 10 grams of glycine from that. But just because you're getting a lot more methionine, then the ratio is still off. So you want to bring the ratio into balance. And for that, you need to either increase the collagenous meats, so like tendons, ligaments, organ meats, gelatin is great, or take a glycine supplement, or whatever it is to bring the ratio back into balance. And that, at least in my opinion, that will first of all, it's going to normalize the homocysteine levels. Homocysteine in excess is a risk factor for heart disease. So you normalize homocysteine, and in animal models, it also mitigates against the life shortening of excess methionine.
Hmm. Yeah, that was awesome. I need to get back to making homemade gummies out of gelatin powder because I was doing that for the last couple of years, but I was using white refined sugar as the as a sweetener because that was my experiment. But doing it now, I would probably use honey. It's funny actually. Ben Greenfield, I brought it to his house, and he like a couple weeks later, I see a post where he redid the recipe without sugar, like keto ingredients.
Yeah, I mean gummies are amazing. Yeah, I like them.
It's like an anti-aging thing if they're homemade, I think, if they're not
Yeah,
like
yeah. I mean,
Haribo.
gelatin is the healthiest dessert. I think like super low calories, super high glycine, and yeah, it tastes great as well.
Mm-hmm. Uh, thoughts, and kind of on the same vein as rapamycin to some degree. Thoughts on Senolytic supplements? I think there's one I have in my cabinet of a million supplements where it's like you just take it twice a month and then that's it, like 2 days consecutively, and then the Qualia one or whatever. I don't know. I have a million supplements here, but do you think those are efficacious or
Yeah, so
Senolytics?
senolytics that target these zombie cells. Zombie cells are, or senescent senescence is a hallmark of aging, but so far I think they have been like somewhat misunderstood. So yeah, zombie cells, they're these dysfunctional or non-functional cells that spread inflammation and oxidative stress to neighboring cells. But what they find is that these senescent cells actually have some other important roles, or like some like previously unknown roles, like they actually regulate wound healing and stuff like that. So like completely, or keeping the senescent cell burden completely zero all the time, I guess we don't know if it is feasible or if it's a good idea, because yes, these senescent cells also regulate wound healing to a certain extent. So I guess I do take some senolytics like quercetin, but I don't take them for the sake of senolytics. I take them for the sake of like immune system functioning, and they also like regulate the NAD recycling. So I take mostly for those reasons, and not specifically for the senolytics. There are just healthy lifestyle generally also like activates these pathways to a certain extent, but I guess some of these compounds are a good idea, like quercetin and fisetin, but mostly for the reason of like just these anti-inflammatory benefits and NAD recycling, and maybe like every once in a while it is a good idea, but we don't know what is the optimal schedule, like what is the what's the actual routine that you need to take. Like some people do it twice a month, other people say do it every week, so we don't know exactly what's the most optimal routine.
Here's a fun one. You can live forever, but you have to eat only one food for the rest of your life. What is it?
So is it mostly for the taste, or for I have to also consider like the longevity benefits, or
Yeah, whichever. I don't know.
well, I mean, I guess I would never become bored of like pizza or something. Like a good bolognese pizza.
I like it. Probably be apples for me. We just put in like 5 apple trees. I'm really excited. But the apples up here, like fresh apples, there's nothing like it.
Nice.
Are parasites a major cause of illness? I'm gonna ask.
Well, there is certainly like this microbial burden of aging. There's a good book and a YouTube channel by Michael Lustgarten. He's like a PhD who's been doing what Brian Johnson has been doing for the last 15 years. And he's more like actual scientific about it, that has like all the graphs and references. So he's a very great resource for like actual this crazy biohacking for longevity. But he has a book where he talks about and cites all the studies where with age there's this increased burden of microbes and different kinds of pathogens because of the intestinal permeability. So more of these food particles get in the bloodstream and they trigger the immune system and cause endotoxin buildup. And even in Alzheimer's, they're found to be linked with that. Even like oral microbiome, so like certain microbes in the mouth are linked to Alzheimer's risk. So I think that they certainly play a pretty big part. And if you have like some, whether how important it is for you depends on your symptoms. So if you don't have any symptoms, you feel great, then you probably don't have to micromanage that. It's very hard to micromanage the microbiome and the oral microbiome. But if you have like a pretty good routine and you're overall healthy, then your oral microbiome should be also pretty solid. And the same with the gut. You just want to make sure that you don't like experience a lot of the symptoms of this intestinal permeability, or leaky gut, as it's called.
What's his name? Michael
Lustgarten. So like a German.
Oh, wow. I'm gonna have to look him up. I thought Brian Johnson was the only one.
No, I mean, he's a super interesting and like a very cool guy.
Interesting. Oh, is it Conquer Aging or Die Trying? Is that his his channel? Okay.
Yeah. He's a PhD and he's been doing like he's been tracking his biomarkers for the last 15 years and stuff like that.
Cool. We'll just do a few more. I know we're over what I said it would be. Is running a good exercise, like 1 mile a day? Someone asked.
Yeah, I mean, generally, yes. Like, it's cardio. It's good for the lymphatic system. Many people say that it hurts the knees if they run too much. Well, I would say that if your knees hurt from running, then it's probably because you have weak knees. Or, it's, of course, if you have poor running form, then that can exacerbate the issue. But, first of all, the reason you experience the pain is because of the weak knees, and the reason you have weak knees is because you don't do any mechanical tension, or you don't your bones and knees don't experience the mechanical tension which you would experience from lifting weights or running or something like that. So I do think that you should, lift weights, obviously, or do some form of mechanical tension on the joints so that they would stimulate collagen synthesis and strengthen the tendons and the bones. So when it comes to like back pain or something like that, lifting heavy weights doesn't give you back pain. You have back pain because you don't lift heavy weights, if that makes sense. Or you don't lift anything. Like the sedentary person who doesn't lift anything, they get back pain in their 40s, is because they haven't never lifted any like on a consistent basis. So exercise is actually something that protects you against these kinds of things and these kinds of pains. With running, yes, you could make the argument that running on the pavement is very unnatural and just heel striking on the pavement is bad for the knees. I agree. Like if you run very long and you're doing prolonged endurance, or you're doing like just too frequently these exercise sessions, then at some point it might, start to nag your hips or knees and stuff like that. But running 1 mile is certainly, I don't think that's not going to cause any issues. And is running 1 mile enough to give any like health benefits? Of course, any movement is better than nothing at all. In terms of like cardiorespiratory fitness, then you do want to do like a lot of this zone 2 movement, which describes something around like 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate is zone 2. And that is what builds your aerobic base and improves your heart health. And, higher VO2 max is one of the biggest predictors of reduced mortality and generally is important for longevity. So I think that some running in the routine is great. I've been doing a lot more zone 2 cardio over the past few months and I feel great. And, the same with exercise, or as with lifting weights, you want to kind of do both of them.
Mm. Yeah. Someone asked, how much zone 2 training do you do per week versus weightlifting?
Well, right now I've been doing usually I train weights 3 times a week, 45 minutes each session, something like that. Maybe on some days it's going to be a 4th workout as well. But yeah, I keep them pretty short. I focus mostly on like strength-based powerlifting movements. I don't do a lot of like bodybuilding with the exception of a few workouts. And then zone 2, I'll train also. So for cardio, I'll do like maybe 2 to 3, like zone 2 workouts, which is 45 minutes of this 60 to 70% of my maximum heart rate. And then once a week, I'll do like this interval training so it's like 4 rounds, 4 minutes of maximum intensity, 4 minutes of very low intensity, and repeat 4 times. So it's like 32 minutes. So that's very good for increasing the VO2 max. Whereas doing the zone 2 lays like a baseline or the foundation to your like aerobic capacity. So yeah, that's kind of generally my workouts, around 3 to 4 cardio workouts and 3 weightlifting workouts. And I don't really have super long workout sessions. I don't work out any longer than an hour a day on most cases. So it's the frequency, I think, what I like more, instead of like super hammering myself and going to full failure for once or twice a week. I like to keep it like slightly less intense, but more frequently.
Yeah, when I was wearing the CGM from Levels, like the glucose monitor, I was doing the experiment of not walking after breakfast and then going for a walk after breakfast, even like a 5 to 10 minute walk, like a really short walk. And it was so interesting to see the blood glucose stabilization of just that light movement after eating. It was just such a huge difference.
Yeah.
So that's my strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. And like in some cases, walking briskly is also zone 2. And, farm work is very nice zone 2, like, shoveling. And I also grew up in a farm and, chop wood every summer and stuff like that. So it's a very good workout and it does train a lot of the aerobic system as well. And one cool hack is actually weighted vest walking, or, you don't necessarily need to run. If you can't run, your knees hurt. Hiking is amazing. I just got a weighted vest. So it's like 20 kilos. And just walking with that is also increases your heart rate pretty nicely. And, there's multiple ways to kind of get to the end result.
Are you shoveling a lot of snow in the winters?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a lot. Like, there's actually one video from last winter where, so my mother had to go to work, but in the evening there was like a lot of snow, or during the night there was a bunch of snow. And I went outside in my underwear and with the with the shoes on and the shovel. I was just cleaning the car and stuff like that so she could go to work. And my wife, she opened the window and she just woke up. I woke up before her and started shoveling. She woke up and filmed me doing the shoveling in the snow with my underwear and getting cold thermogenesis in the morning, plus some good movement. And that's that's the maximum biohacking life, shoveling in the winter with my underwear.
I'm gonna try that this winter. That's awesome. It sounds like we might get a similar snow load. I mean, it gets to the point here where you need machines. So I need to do the tractor and the skid steer and like all the different machines for the different times of winter. Last question here. What are some things you've changed your mind about health-wise in the past few years? And it could be one thing or a few things or whatever.
Well, like I've always done like a cyclical carb diet. So like, and I've never been full keto. I've never been carnivore. I've never been like a super high carb either. So I've always believed in like the cyclical carb intake, mostly because of coming from like a bodybuilder fitness background when I was in my early 20s. So that's where the carb cycling is used sometimes to like manipulate the body composition, and it made sense and I got good results. So I've always done that. But what I've changed my mind about, I guess, would be like I'm eating a lot more plants now than I was like maybe 5 years ago. So in like 5 years ago, I might have been more, like I said, like more meat based. And right now I'm just eating more fish and eggs, and definitely a lot more like different kinds of plants. I guess that's kind of my main dietary change that has happened. And I mean, I feel better. Of course, I wasn't like I was already like healthy and stuff like that back then as well. But I mean, my blood work is better, and I'm feeling also better, and my body composition is better. My training is better. So yeah, generally it's been a positive change.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like we have a very similar diet. We have like 12 hens and we get like 6 to 9 eggs a day on average, something like that. Fertile eggs, and eating a lot of fish. Um, well, this was awesome. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Oh, last question. Did you ever do the um ion the what's it called? The Genova ion panel? Like
Uh,
I think it's
no,
like a urine test. It's looking at amino acids and
no, I haven't.
okay, just curious. I'm about to do that one. I'm behind on all these tests that I want to try, so I'm about to send that in and see see how messed up I am now.
I should, yeah, check it out. I've been doing a lot of different tests recently as well.
Yeah, I have a whole bin with of tests that I have to do. Just it's kind of a lot of work. I mean, especially living in a rural environment because the drive is always.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, this was a lot of fun. So you're on YouTube, Instagram. Where else can people find you?
Yeah, it's Siim Land on Instagram, YouTube. I'm on Twitter as well, but most of the content is on Instagram and YouTube.
Awesome. And then simland.co is your website as well.
Yeah,
Great. Yeah, I'll put all that in the show notes. And um, do you do consultations or anything like that? Or
yeah. I It's not my everyday focus. I have a lot of books that I've written myself and co-authored with Dr. James DiNicolantonio. So we have like 8 books or something like that co-authored. So there's a lot of very accessible information from there about collagen, minerals, blood sugar, obesity, physical performance, immunity. So yeah, I guess there's a lot of information people can check out.
yeah, the mineral fix one was really cool. That's one of my favorite topics is minerals. And it's the one I've been delving into the last few years. And yeah, that balance of all those nutrients is fascinating. There's infinite nuance in there, and then you throw in genetics, and it just gets crazy.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
so awesome. Well, stick around as we close out the show. Thanks for coming on, Sim. This was great.
My pleasure.
Well, that's all for today. I always enjoy speaking with different people on their longevity protocols and what they're doing. It's going to be really interesting to see where everybody's at in the health community in several decades from now, say 50 years from now. And we're also individual, so it's really difficult to make blanket recommendations for everyone. For example, Sim mentioned that he feels best not eating too close to bedtime, like 4 hours before bed. I personally sleep better if I eat closer to bedtime. And I know a lot of people that are that same way. So it's really about the experimentation. My current belief on longevity, yes, data is great and blood work and looking at your genetic SNPs and all of that is important. But to me, what's even more important than all of that combined is keeping your stress levels low. The biochemists Linus Pauling and Abram Hoffer both talked about how most mammals make their own vitamin C under stress, but because humans don't, we have kind of a chronic, mild scurvy situation. And Abram Hoffer once said if we can make our own, it would be about 14 grams. That's 14,000 milligrams per day, and even more when we're under stress. And one of the main stressors that I've been studying for over a decade and spending a lot of money experimenting with using all sorts of devices and trinkets and energy devices to try to mitigate. Now I've come to a place of realizing that nutrition is the mitigation, namely vitamin C, magnesium, vitamin E, but also selenium, zinc, and other metals will do it. So Shilajit is an EMF protector, in my opinion. But of everything, if I just had to pick one thing, it would be ascorbate or L-ascorbic acid, also known as vitamin C. A lot of people don't know that colony collapse disorder in bees was reduced by 33% just by supplementing vitamin C. And how does it protect against EMFs? It's through the electromagnetic radiation being depolarized. So vitamin C is actually redistributing the energy and decreasing the intensity of the energy in hitting the tissues. So even though we put up a fruit orchard, we're working on a greenhouse, we have great pastured eggs here, I rely heavily on supplementation, and I believe I always will, just because they've helped me so much. Lately, I've been focusing really heavily on vitamin C, zinc, B vitamins, the fat soluble vitamins, systemic enzymes. That would be like my foundation. Of course, I take every single Mitolife product, but I'm trying to simplify it here and kind of give a starting point where I would start. I started years ago with just magnesium and Shilajit alone, and that made a huge difference. And since then, I've been stacking and adding to it and feeling better and better. It's really cool over the years to feel like I have more energy and more creativity and better memory. That is the goal. And I think beyond blood tests and data, that is one of the best metrics to pay attention to. If you want to explore Siim Land's work more, you can go to Siim Land with 2 I's, so SIIM land.co. You can check out his store, his books, his courses, coaching, blog posts, etc. There's a lot of info on there, and definitely check out his YouTube channel. My website is matt-blackburn.com. You can read about my CLF protocol. You can see all of my recommended products. For the hardcore listeners that follow my work closely, a lot of people have been asking me how I've been doing reintroducing coffee after taking a break for about 6 months and where paraxanthine fits into it now. Coffee and caffeine consumption are such an individual thing, and I think caffeine gets wrongly separated from coffee a lot of the time when people talk about the toxicity of caffeine and the detriments. They're speaking about it in isolation, where it's like isolated in a pill, which is different from getting it in the complex that is coffee. So what we do here is roast our own beans. I have a really nice espresso machine, and I always balance it out with some maple syrup, Shilajit. I put a little bit of MCT oil in there. And I've been finding that upping my zinc carnosine consumption, so the Mitolife supplement, has been helping tremendously with my nervous system. I never made the zinc connection until I started diving into my genetic mutations with zinc transport and utilization in the cell. And I have a lot of mutations there. And so I've been upping my dose substantially and just feeling this deep calm in my nervous system. Kind of feel like a new person since upping my zinc. And I've been revisiting Carl Pfeiffer's work. We have a big library of health books here, and some of which I reviewed on my YouTube, Mitolife Academy. I do little library tours. And Carl Pfeiffer wrote a lot about vitamin C and how it helps with so many different conditions. And I feel like it was a big missing link for me. And I believe we all have individual missing links, which can be largely solved through supplementation and just taking supraphysiological doses that are impossible to get from food. And that was the inspiration behind starting my brand, Mitolife, which you can find at mitolife.co. We have grounding sheets, shampoo and conditioner. We're about to finally release our 7-stage drinking water filter. And then we have a pretty good collection of supplements. And what differentiates my brand from, say, Now Foods or Nature's Way or some of these other huge brands is that I'm moving towards bamboo silica as the excipient or filler. A lot of people don't realize that you can't have 100% of the active ingredient in a capsule because you have to reach this dosage that isn't going to give people nausea If I released a zinc carnosine that was 80 milligrams per capsule, there's probably only a small percentage of people that can handle that. I can handle that. I feel great taking that much at once. But 16 milligrams, you have to fill up the rest with something. And what are you going to fill it up with? Is it silica? Is it magnesium stearate? Is it titanium dioxide? You look at a lot of these supplement labels at the health food store, and the other ingredients list, besides the capsule, there's 2, 3, 4 other ingredients. And if you're a serious supplementer like myself and you're taking a lot every day, that's going to add up over time. So switching to bamboo silica that actually has benefits for improved memory and a little bit of aluminum detox. I'm noticing my hair growing almost too fast where I need so many haircuts, and same with my nails, just accelerated hair and nail growth. And obviously our skin loves silica. It's just such a better ingredient to have in there. And then the latest thing is we're switching over our products to better bottles. So there are a few products that already have that, the encephalon, the zinc carnosine, and the jellyfish jolt. And what that means is it's essentially biodegradable. You can throw it away, and once it reacts with UV light, say in a landfill, and some bacteria, in about a year, it will start to break down both the lid and the bottle and will leave behind no microplastics versus all of these other brands that you can buy at the health food store or on Amazon or wherever that just stay in our environment and release microplastics for 500 years or more and just get smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's really screwing up our seafood, which is why I'm really excited about Seatopia and this whole idea of farmed fish and doing it right to have heavy metal free, parasite free, microplastic free seafood. It's crazy that we have to think about all this stuff, but it's really important. And I do think that it really hampers our lifespan to constantly get hit with all this stuff. And the people constantly getting hit with all this stuff aren't taking the right supplements. Maybe they're taking some fish oil or krill oil or CoQ10, really basic stuff, but they're not understanding the connections between everything and why you need to increase your ascorbic acid intake, why you need more zinc with cadmium exposure, why it's smart to take systemic enzymes consistently to have those circulating in your body, dissolving excess scar tissue. These are all the things I like to educate about on my social media and in the Mitolife Academy on YouTube. These are really powerful tools to improve your quality of life. And they really work, and a lot of people feel them when they take them or stop taking them. So that's all. I'll see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged.